Okay, so without further ado, unless there's someone in the room that I haven't passed the word to, let me welcome you all and thank you for joining today's ITACA Connect. This is a space where ideas and stories and community come together. It is meant to be not just another webinar, but really an opportunity for the network of ITACA's associates to meet, to share, and to grow together. I believe that together we are the community that is supporting the development of climate resilience and ocean innovation across the Caribbean and Latin America. So these events offer us really a platform to help sustain and improve our practice. And today is a particular especially event within the ITACA Connect series because today we're pioneering a new form of ITACA Connect, which we are calling Voices Behind the Page, a conversation series with ITACA authors. We're taking the voices from authors that have supported our blog and contributed with their ideas, their perspectives, and we're bringing them to life, giving us an opportunity to not just listen to an interview with today's author, but also to question, to challenge, to talk about the issues that are happening in the region through the work that this author is presenting to us. And the idea is to see how her story connects to our work individually and also to our region. So today, we want to really thank Sandra because Sandra is the pioneer of this event. This event is going to be divided into, well, this introduction that is already a little bit longer, so I'll cut down to the meat of it. We'll have a 15-minute interview with Sandra, followed by a Q&A. And the idea is after the Q&A, which is focusing on Sandra's interview and blog, we then have a networking session where we can just open up the floor to anything else we want to discuss within this opportunity to get to know each other, get to know about our work, our concerns, things that you would like to see emerge in this growing platform that is the ITACA Collective. And then we'll just have a closing remarks and next steps where I'll tell you a little bit about where we are heading with this series. So, as I said, today we have the opportunity to have Sandra McLeish. She's pioneering our Voices Behind the Page. Sandra is a sustainability consultant. Her work really spans different disciplines and in many ways is very interdisciplinary, working in the intersection between climate change, public health, female empowerment, and public to private partnerships. She is also not only a consultant, but also a manufacturer and a leader in agro-processing, as she was explaining to us at the beginning of the meeting to those who heard her introduction. And she's currently our health specialist in one of ITACA's landmark projects this year, which is a project that is seeking to help Dominica accessing funding from the Green Climate Fund. It's an integrated approach that combines health, education, and agriculture to support Dominica as becoming the first climate resilient nation. I'm going to now start the first section of this agenda by asking a couple of questions to Sandra. And if along the way you have impressions or questions you'd like to ask, I'll just ask that you wait until we have this first 15 minutes with her directly, and then we're going to open the floor to everyone else out there. And talking a little bit first about what has been your personal journey. I mean, you've worked for over 30 years at the intersection between public health, climate in Latin America and the Caribbean. Um,
Yes.
it'd be interesting, I'm a much younger, generation, and there's other younger generations listening to this in the YouTube recording. They would like to know, what is a pivotal moment that you remember when you realize the intersection of the themes
Mhm.
that you touch upon in your day-to-day work, especially as it comes to gender and climate action, which is really the focus of your blog on female leaders in the Caribbean.
Thank you so much, Laura, for the opportunity to be able to share on this. Sometimes when you're passionate about something, you think people's eyes are going to glaze over. I really appreciated the forum that Ithaca allowed me to even just share on the blog. So this is something that's really been formulated in my mind over several years. And as a woman, you live it. Gender issues is something that it's a part of just being a woman. But in the Caribbean and Latin America, but I can speak specifically about in the Caribbean, we've gotten so used to being disenfranchised that sometimes you don't even realize when it's happening. And a pivotal moment for me came when, I was working with my husband on our family-owned business, and I'm the CEO of the company. It's my company. It came about because I have a farm. That's where I actually started as a farmer. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't know. And we have world famous Blue Mountain coffee in Jamaica. So I started out as a coffee farmer, and I'm an avid coffee drinker. And I remember going in to negotiate a loan for my property, and everything I do has to be climate friendly, So I was looking about how to harvest in the most sustainable way and how to even plant and manage the farm in the most sustainable way. And so they called me in for a meeting. And I had already gotten kind of been approved for the loan, but they came to me and they were like, well, I'm expecting them to ask me questions about some of the nuances of the projects I was going to be implementing. And the man asked me if my husband was going to come and co-sign the loan with me. And that was like, are you serious, sir? This is my project, it's my company. It's my asset. But yet, he was like, what do you mean you're going to sign this now? No. Isn't your husband going to come and co-sign with you? And I've heard stories like that over and over and over again. And that kind of piqued my interest. And I can tell you other stories of just trying to be a businesswoman in the Caribbean, going for loans with other people. So, when you go into the bank, you're assigned a loans officer. And I remember going for a loan, and I was one of three people that business officer put forward at a particular time for a loan. The other two persons were men, and the other two men got the loan, and I didn't. And I mean, the stories like that.
I mean, like what you're describing are very systemic barriers,
Yes.
very hard to break in how women are perceived in the Caribbean. And these challenges are all throughout the region. I think like there may be small differences from one country to the next, but I think we
Mhm.
have all experienced it. Um, in overcoming these barriers, what has worked for you? What is a strategy that you've seen works best in trying to surpass these kind of challenges?
Well, one of the things that I want to highlight is that this kind of sparked my interest in how women are really disenfranchised and treated differently. And when you look only from a climate perspective, the issues of climate change that are taking place worldwide, the recent data I've seen from UN Women is that 158 million women and girls are now going to be pushed over that poverty line by 2050. And so it behooves us to ensure that any project we're doing, we are capturing the data, we are counting women, we're making sure that we disaggregate. So we're not saying something like 100,000 people benefited from this project. But how many of those 100,000 were actually women? Have we disaggregated the data by gender and even by age? And if we started doing more of that, Laura, I strongly believe we'd be able to hone in on the best interventions to reduce that $158 million number target that we're hearing from UN Women of people are going to be going into poverty.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know if there's been important mentors in your career,
Yes.
and also how you think that leaders like yourself and like those in this call can mentor the next generation of women climate professionals.
So thank you for that. So I'm a big believer in mentorship. I never used to be. I adopted this idea later on in life because I realized that sometimes it really is important to open up doors. It really is important to lay a foundation for the next generation. And people won't
Mm.
understand why it's important to capture gender disaggregated data if they haven't bought into the concept of how that would feed into them. Why would Ministry of Statistical Institute or an Institute of Jamaica go out of their way to do another level of effort in capturing disaggregated data, if they don't get it, if they don't understand why it's important. And so I find it very important for me to be a mentor for other women and for me to be mentored, because lifelong learning is a critical part of who we are. And when you're an entrepreneur, you learn that you really don't retire at 50 or 55 or age 60. It's totally artificial, especially now when you have AI and when you can be your own boss or work in a company that's not limiting you by your age. You realize that lifelong learning is an important part of who we are and what we do. And so I'm very fortunate to have had women that I can look up to, women who've broken the color barrier. I'm thinking of someone who comes to my mind are all the women who've headed the Jamaica Promotions Company, Jamper in Jamaica, Pat Francis and Diane Edwards, who held their own in a very male-dominated circle and did not lose who they were as their grace and their womanness in order to fit in. In agriculture and in science and technology, we're kind of taught that this is a man's world. And if you're going to work in that area, you have to behave like a man and adapt male characteristics. And I push against that every single day. Because if you come and see me on the farm in my water boots with a machete in hand, and then you see me the following day in a boardroom, you would not believe it's the same person, you know? And I've been fortunate enough to benefit from persons who have allowed me to represent both areas of my life, of being a farmer, of being an entrepreneur, of being a manufacturer, of breaking ground in that area. When I first joined the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, I was one of a handful of women. And I'm happy to say that 8 years later, almost a third of us are women. And for the first time, we have a woman who is heading this merged entity of the Jamaica Manufacturers and the Jamaica Exporters Association that have come together. So whereas we've had other women in Jamaica Manufacturers as president and other women in exporters, we now have somebody who's manning this. And I'm now one of the vice presidents. And so that is important for me to be able to share that with people and let people know that you don't have to lose who you are as a woman in order to fit in into this male-dominated world.
No, thank you. Thank you, Sandra. And quite frankly, what you say, it really speaks to my heart directly, because in my own career, female mentors have been so important. They really shaped my career in ways that I would have never envisioned. And when you do sciences like climate science as a degree,
Yeah.
you still are in a male-dominated environment with all the model and all of this. And my mentors belong to a generation of women who pioneered women in climate science, and that kind of like opened up the space for us to be able to enter into much, not totally without challenges, but a much easier career path than the one that
Yes.
they had endured. And it's so great to hear that you enjoyed being a mentor. I will call you on that in the next coming months, because it is one of the things that we want to pilot within ITACA. We have this network of over 200 experts, and we are
Yeah.
considering like setting up a pilot of mentorship program, so that we can ensure that we are sharing experience, best practice, know-hows that are sometimes intangible, that are not in the books, and so that we
Right.
are opening up as well the for generation to come into this with better tools and more wisdom, so that we can provide them with those. So I will be calling you upon that in the next few months. Remember me.
No worries. Can I also add very quickly as well, Laura, that just to underscore that we need to understand why gender is important. And sometimes we don't understand it ourselves. So having the evidence that has said that if you have three or more women sitting on a board, your company is 20 is 27% more likely to meet its goals and improve its bottom line. That's empirical evidence. That means that you will be able to get 27% more return on your investment just by having three or more women on your board because of the diversity and the different perspectives and the opportunity for you to not have a Bay of Pigs, but and a Bay of Pigs concept, I should say, but for you to be able to have a diversity in thinking, and that will improve. And that data, by the way, Laura, goes across subject lines. It doesn't matter if you're manufacturing widgets, if you're in the climate industry, if you're a service or a consulting firm, just by having 30% of your board being women. And so we ourselves need to understand the role we play and the power we have in the spaces we occupy, and to ensure that we bring that and not shy away from that responsibility that we have. I hope that's making sense.
Mm. Yeah, and you're pointing to basically one critical institutional change that needs to occur, that reaps so many benefits to society as a whole. I wonder if you could tell us, like, if you were to envision what the future may look like in, say, 10, 15 years, what does the future look like for women in the Caribbean in climate leadership roles? And what are some of these that need to be today to make that vision real?
I think one of the things we can start doing is committing to ensuring that we are disaggregating our data, as I mentioned, by gender. And age would be also a useful one as well, but also that we are counting climate financing and how much climate financing is actually reaching to women. Making sure that in our C-suites, in the senior levels of all the companies, any organization that we're involved in, I don't care if it's church, if you go to the gym and they actually have a group of people training you, or if you're working as a consultant, how diverse is that team? And we need to advocate that there needs to be diversity on the teams that we occupy. You know, 30% is a proven critical mass. 30%, at least 30% of wherever we are should have women. And I think that if we take those active steps in whatever circles we occupy, we're going to be laying a foundation, say, in another 10. We're looking at 2030, everything goes towards 2030, but even as we move beyond that, another 10 or 15 years, I think we're going to be in a much better position. We should also make sure that our legislation and the policy environment is taking gender into consideration. Some of the interventions that we create in our consulting world ensure that we're taking women into consideration. There are certain times, for example, that women are just bogged down with other responsibilities. And I shouldn't say bogged down, but we have other responsibilities. So, for example, there's a company that my family is expanding into, where we're going to be targeting 80% of all the people who work in our firm are going to be women. And it's looking at renewable energy and cold storage for farmers. So we're targeting women farmers. Putting up the solar panels on top of the cold storage, we're actively seeking women to do that work. Women are going to be hired to manage a facility, and we're going to be doing agro processing right there in the field by the farmers. So instead of having the farm produce go to us in the city, we're going to be doing the manufacturing right there. It's off the grid, so energy is not a problem. And we are even going to be working with a staggered timeline. So instead of it being a typical 8-hour day, like 8 to 5, we're breaking it in the middle of the day to support when women need to be going home to do childcare. and bringing up another schedule in the evening. So we're going to be having two shifts, but we're working in accordance with a woman's schedule. Just breaking up the day in a logical way so that she can be available.
Oh, Sandra, I'm so impressed by not just how much you're leading through, sharing your reflections, your opinions in a blog, but how you're leading with action, on the ground. I think there's a lot that
Thank you.
other organizations and companies in the region could learn from you. And I take all of those points about there are so many different ways to mainstream gender in operations and the
Yes.
importance of also mainstreaming gender considerations in visioning exercises. I do hope that past Vision 2030 in Jamaica, there will be a
Right.
much stronger focus on the next vision on the role of women and on gender mainstreaming. So I'm hoping that that's already been taken into consideration. If not, I'm sure that you're in Jamaica and you will make your voice heard to make sure it is.
I'll do my
We need
best.
a reform at so many levels, but what one critical area of reform is policy. And
Yes.
in your blog, you highlighted as an example Peru's Gender and Climate Change Action Plan as a model that could inspire other nations. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just hoping you could share a little bit more about what are the aspects of this plan that you found most significant and whether you think that this can be replicated in across the Caribbean. Like, what is one policy innovation from that plan that perhaps we can do in other parts of the region?
Peru's gender and climate action plan, it really stood out for me because they, from the get-go, they hardwired gender into everything they were doing. If my memory serves me correctly, they had about 8 different climate sectors that they looked at, forestry, water, solid waste, etc. And it was very clear that they ensured from the beginning that they took gender into consideration. So it's not on the back end that they said, oh, now that we've collected the data, let's try to disaggregate it. From every instrument, from what I understood, all the tools they used, how they captured the information in selecting their key interviews, their key informant interviews, they took women into consideration and they tried to do it in an even way. And so for me, that was a good documented example of how, from the beginning, to factor in gender. It's not something that should come in midway or at the end.
Totally. And actually, I've just realized that also there is Panama also has a gender and climate change action plan mainstreaming, and
Awesome.
part of the
Yeah.
role right now or the mandate this is from the Ministry of Environment is to try to get also other ministries and try to get others across to understand the why, the how, and the
Yes.
when is the best time to like start having these conversations and including them as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for also reminding us of that there is feasibility, in policy innovation, and that we have examples from Latin America that can also be embraced
Yes.
and brought all as well. Yeah, do you want to add something to that? I can
I,
see
I just
you.
wanted I just wanted to say that again, people are surprised that I've had these experiences in the Caribbean. And because again, the Caribbean, we have high percentage of politicians, etc., who are women. Women occupy important positions, even in government. But I always have to remind people, look at the highest level in your organization. Do you actually see even 50-50 men and women? What you will find is that women occupy that significant middle management. So we're the doers. We're a lot of the gatekeepers. But when you go into the boardroom, it's the men. Who is chairing the committee? It's the one man. The entire committee who is going to be selected. When we do workshops, who automatically gets selected to be the note taker and even the reporter, but who is the leader who is guiding that little group? It ends up
Mhm.
being the man in the group in the room. So we have it's affirmative action is how I put it. There must be affirmative action in making sure, and that's why my leaving thing for everybody would always be number one, look around in every space we occupy. Do you have at least 30% being women? And all the data you're collecting, no matter where it is and for what, make sure that it's disaggregated by gender. And if we do those two things, we would go a long way, Laura. I just wanted to highlight that. So don't be
Yeah.
fooled by the number of women when you go into a workshop. Who are the power people in that room, and are there women?